So I know things are changing rapidly in this world, so what I say in this video may not be true after a while. But right now, there's a lot of talk about this concept called social distancing. And I thought it would be helpful if I did a project to show people what that looks like and maybe have some fun in the process. So check out this build video and let me know what you think. So the first step in this project is to get myself a 3/4 inch by 4x8 sheet of plywood. And it was such a nice day, and really the only place I had enough room to work was outside, so I decided to start this project outside. The next thing I needed was a pivot point for my layout work, so I got myself a long 2x4 and laid it down on the edge of the plywood, and here I am squaring it up, and then I just attached it so that it was staying in place while I was doing my layout work. And then I just drove a screw into the far end of the 2x4 and used that to hook a tape measure on, and I just stretched that tape measure out as far as I needed for my layout, and I just started drawing curves with my pen. And then I just took my jigsaw and just started cutting along those lines that I laid out. It was a little bit less accurate than I would have liked, but it worked pretty well for this situation. So I needed a total of 5 of these arc-shaped segments for this project, so here you can see me cutting the last one. After I got the rough shapes cut out, I just took the edges of each of them and just cleaned them up with the sander. Then I took each segment and I drilled a hole in the ends of each one to prepare it to receive some pins I'm going to use to join these up. Now with those arc segments done, I moved on to using a 1/4 inch plywood sheet to make some thin strips that are going to serve as the edging for those arc-shaped segments. Here I'm just placing some weights on the edge of the plywood to keep it in place while I cut it as a substitute for clamping it. Now this is my circular saw that I use, and I attached a straight edge guide to it. I don't know if you can still buy this thing. I'll see if you can still find it online or not. I'll put the link down in the description if I find it. And here's all the strips that I cut, 5 pieces to go with those arc-shaped segments. And here I am gluing them onto the edge of the segments. And after I got everything all glued and clamped up, I decided to add some screws just for good measure. And then coming back to the arc segments, I drew radii on each of their ends and then sanded them down to get them to their final shapes. Alright, so now it's time to take the pieces that we've made and lay them out and see what they look like. And you can see now the size of this circle that I'm creating. It's a pretty good size. It should be 12 feet across if I calculate it right. And here you can see the pieces of dowel rod that I cut to make pins to lock these segments together. And then I also drilled holes in the ends of those dowels to allow me to put smaller dowels into the ends to lock them in place. Alright, so now I moved on to cutting some blanks out of 3/4 inch plywood. And these are going to be pieces that make up these retainer clamps that you'll see me making shortly. And here you can see the 10 plates that I made that are going to be used in these retainer plate assemblies. And then I'm starting to glue everything up here. And here's all 5 of the finished retainer clamps. And now we're going to go ahead and install them. So you can see how they go over the pins that were already placed in the assembly earlier. And they just kind of slip over the joint there to kind of reinforce it. And now with the retainer clamps in place, I'm drilling through both the clamps and the segments and then putting a dowel through all that and then locking that in place with some glue. And that serves as a pivot, so now that retainer clamp can be swung in and out over the joint between the segments. Here I'm just taking a moment to observe the work I've done so far. And then moving on to the next step, we're going to start making the frame that is used to support this whole assembly. So those are some long 1x3 strips that I'm trying to lay out in a way that'll give me the strongest possible structure using the minimum amount of material. So I decided on this A-frame design, and I'm just marking the locations for everything to remember where everything goes. And here I'm drilling into some wood pieces to make some lifting eyes for the frame. And now I'm gluing those lifting eyes onto those long strips. And here I'm using some metal L brackets and some screws to hold the frame together. And then where the 2 long strips meet at a point, I decided to drill through the ends of them and just use some screws and nuts to attach everything together. So with the A-frame assembly complete, I'm turning it over so that the lifting eyes are facing up, and then laying it over the circular assembly. And then I'm going to tuck the ends of the A-frame underneath the circular assembly so it's ready to support the circular assembly. Alright, now let's see if this A-frame assembly is able to support the weight of this circular assembly. And yes, it can. For a little extra security, I'm taking these little blocks and attaching them to the ends of the A-frame to kind of keep the circular part aligned to the A-frame. Alright, and now I'm taking some nylon rope and attaching it to the lifting eyes of the A-frame, and that's going to create the lifting loops for this whole assembly. One last pre-test before we do the lifting test on this thing. Looks like we're good to go. So here we go. It's a bit awkward, that's for sure. And it didn't quite want to sit level right away. It took a little effort, but I got it to cooperate. And I'm just trying to see if I can walk around with this thing. And yeah, I can walk around. It's definitely not something I'd want to do for any length of time. Let's just say I was really glad when I was able to put this thing down after I tested it. Alright, so the project's done. I've accomplished the goal. I wanted to show you all how much 6 feet all around you is, which is quite a bit actually when you look at that, right? So I'm just taking this thing apart. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Am I going to keep using it? I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, it was an interesting project. Even if I don't use this thing anymore and you never use one, at least now you have a better feel for what that distance looks like, and you can keep that in mind as you go about your daily business.